Good afternoon, I am Hajar Naili. We are entering the last week of Immigrant Heritage Month, and joining us today is Mamadou Samba, the Executive Director at the Mayor's Office on African Affairs. Mamadou Samba was appointed in his current position by Washington, D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser in 2015. Mamadou Samba was born in Senegal and moved to the United States at a very young age with his family. Mamadou, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Well, Mamadou, we'll be talking about your work in a second, but let's start by getting to know you better about your personal story and what brought you to the United States.
My father at one point was assigned to Washington, D.C. as part of the military attaché as a diplomat. And so I had an opportunity through that to come to the United States to join my three sisters who already live in the U.S. And unlike some immigrants who either migrate to find a job or flee persecution, I came only because my parents wanted him to get an education. So this is how I came to the U.S. and I've been here since.
Well, now you're a very accomplished young man.
I don't know about that.
Yet, like any successful immigrants, I must assume that it was not an easy path to success. Can you tell us maybe about the challenges that you faced, especially during your first year in the U.S., and how you overcame them?
Yeah, I try to avoid talking about my own challenges because it makes every other immigrant seem as if every immigrant has a very important story and they face crazy challenges.
Yes.
But for me, the challenges started with when I first came. I was 18, 19, and I was in high school. Best spot to start because I went in. I had to deal with the cultural barriers, the language barriers, and the stereotype and the stigma that is associated with being an African and an immigrant. And so for me, when I was in high school, one of the things is I would tell people my name is Mamadou. They would ask me, "What did your mama do?" They make fun of my name. And they make fun of Africa, they make fun of who we are. People used to ask us, "Do you know Shaka Zulu?" I said, "Shaka Zulu lived in like 14 something. Of course I don't know Shaka Zulu." And so we faced the cultural barriers, the language barriers, but eventually I was able to assimilate a bit more. But then there were more challenges. Mainly when I was in college, for example, and this is where I think the tougher challenge is. When I was in college, I went to school with no resources, like many immigrants, and I wanted to get an education. I wanted to have positive influence, and for 2 years in college, I slept on a floor that was as hard as what we're standing on today, living on 15 cents cheeseburger and going many nights with no food in my stomach. And I had to come to the United States to know what hunger is all about. Back home, I never envied none of my friends, and so that allowed me to become the person I am. It sort of kind of helped me become a stronger, tougher, and more resilient.
Good characters.
Yeah.
So how did you manage to assimilate to the American society and still stick to your true African identity?
Everybody who knows me since high school, if you go back and ask them, they will tell you that I've always been an African. What I mean is I was never willing to compromise my values, my culture, my heritage. I wanted people to call me Mamadou Samba. I didn't want people to call me Sam or give me an American name. Sometime in high school, I would just want to frustrate them. I just put on an African clothes and just go to school like that. And I always wanted to be different because for me, being different meant for me to represent who I am, stay true to my values. I didn't want to lose my accent. I don't want to sound like an American. I wanted to sound like an African because that's who I am. My accent is part of who I am. So I just made sure that whatever made me me, I stuck with that. If people didn't like it, so be it.
That's beautiful. So as the Executive Director of the African Affairs in the D.C. Mayor's Office, could you tell us what is your mission and your current priorities?
Well, first of all, the Mayor's Office on African Affairs, this office is the only office of its kind in the entire nation that is set up at a local level for African immigrants. And so we represent about 18,000 African immigrants. And I don't have any priorities. The mayor has priorities. So my priorities are the mayor's priorities. And this is essentially making sure that every single resident gets a pathway to the middle class, that they have access to good jobs, they live in safe neighborhoods, they have access to good schools, and raise their families. So my role in that is to make sure that the African community who live in DC have access to the same resources, same opportunities, and same information. And so we do that by hosting a number of programs to essentially serve as a liaison between the African community and DC government to make sure that whatever the opportunity, whatever the resource, we take full advantage of it and thrive like everybody else.
And how are you doing so far?
We're doing great. I mean, the past 2.5 years, we've had some significant accomplishment. For the first time ever in DC, we were able to have an African liaison unit within the police department. The police department has identified African police officers who are tasked to working with our office every single day to making sure we address the public safety concerns of the African community. Last year in 2015, we launched our African Diaspora Coding Academy, where every Saturday we train Africans on how to code, how to develop mobile applications. Those are things that we've never done before. And it's one of many of our challenges, but since we don't have enough time, I'll just stop there as far as our accomplishments.
Mamadou, the African community is itself a very diverse community. So how do you address the differences when you try to bring the communities together?
In a way, I don't. In a way, what makes us different is what makes us who we are. You know, I welcome the diversity. We have to be different. We have to have different ideas, different thoughts. And my opinion has evolved in this. Earlier, I used to think that we should all look the same, do the same thing, but we don't have to. We can all live in our corners and have our own thing. But we try to address this diversity around the issues: education, employment, public safety, because those are the things that we have in common. Because unemployment is not just an issue in the Senegalese community, it's an issue in all immigrant communities. And so we try to organize them around the issues and around the values.
Yeah, I was actually about to ask you how, what are the main challenges that the African immigrant communities are facing in the United States? And I know you are in Washington, D.C., but you lived also in different states, so you have an experience of what it's like.
So the challenges vary. Obviously, when they come, they struggle with integration, the language, the culture, navigating the system. And so somebody who's in the U.S. between 0 to 5 years, they are very less likely to be able to be stable economically. And so if they're not stable economically, they're less likely to be able to afford the healthcare insurance, for example, which affects our healthcare challenges. African immigrants, we are the healthiest, but deep down, if you look at health as an issue, we have some serious challenges in health. About 25% of us lack healthcare insurance. This is before Obamacare. I'm excited to see how it is now. And there's also an aspect dealing with stereotype and stigma. There's a lot of information we don't know. And so, which makes it harder for some of us to go to the doctor, because we think because of our immigration status we will be deported if you go to emergency room. We think because of that we're not able to have health insurance. So that's one aspect. But also when you look at education, we are most educated among all immigrant groups. But when you look at the kind of work that we do, we are underemployed. This is why when you get into a cab in DC, more than likely an Ethiopian, more than likely has a master's or PhD, but working at is unemployed.
That is true.
Very true.
So this is a question that I asked to our previous guests who belong to the African diaspora. How can the diaspora be the voice of change in the development in Africa?
By doing what we're currently doing, by being involved in a conversation, by sitting at the table and being part of the conversation, by demanding our voices to be heard. For the most part, we come here, we get a good job, and some of us, not everybody, we tend to forget about those that we left behind, or we tend to forget about our neighbors, or we tend to forget about the issues that we can contribute our time, our money, our efforts to better those initiatives. So we can be involved in so many different ways, but being at the table, being relevant is one way to do that.
So last question, Mamadou. How can the various African community be of a support system to the newly arrived immigrants and refugees here in the United States?
Well, in so many different ways. In Washington, D.C., we have an Office on African Affairs. We also have a Commission on African Affairs. These are 15 members that are appointed by the mayor to represent the community, and they work hand in hand with our office to make sure that we understand the issues and to also make sure that we have addressed them. The community, they have to go towards the information. They have to seek us out, just like we're seeking the various communities to understand who's here, what are the issues, what challenges do they face. And we also have to be willing to join our efforts. We have to be willing to join our efforts because, like I mentioned earlier, there are issues that one small community just cannot address.
Mm-hmm.
We have to do that by joining our effort, our resources, our mind, our human capital, to be able to advocate, to lobby our government and say, we are a strong community here. We are taxpayers. Our kids go to school here. These are the issues that we care about. And this is one of the things that we try to do. Before I was appointed to this position, I was an advocate. I was in a community, and I was after myself and many other Africans were going after the community, try to understand what issues do they have and how can we lobby the government to provide the resources and opportunities for them.
I will add just a final question. What are some of the upcoming projects or events coming for the African community here in the DMV area?
Well, in July, we have two of our major events. July 14, 2017, we will host the 3rd annual Young African Connection Summit. And this is hosted in partnership with Howard University, UNESCO Center for Peace, the Mandela Washington Fellows, and so many partners. And the idea is to create a platform where Africans who live in DC and those on the continent and all over the place can exchange on partnership, on engagement, on collaboration. And how can we brainstorm on working together? So this will take place on July the 14th at Howard University. And the next day, which is July the 15th, we will celebrate Mandela Day of Service. We are the only municipality in the U.S. that I know of that celebrates Mandela Day. And so we will be joined by 150 volunteers for 67 minutes of public service at Anacostia River. And I hope to see you there and see your viewers and everybody at the event. So those are our two major events, and we're very excited about it.
We'll be with you. And we do thank you for joining us today. It was a pleasure. Before we say goodbye, please go ahead and like our Facebook page, IOM USA, if you want to hear more stories of immigrants in the United States. Thank you for watching.